You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, your weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today. So I am going to go ahead and let her introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, my name is Jeannine Kim. I am a mystic. All of that includes an intuitive, a medium, astrologer, holistic health practitioner, teacher, and yogi. I've been working this way for almost 30 years now professionally. I have clients all over, although I've been intuitive my whole life. And you can get a hold of me at JeannineKim.com.
Thank you. Perfect. And listeners, as always, I will have that linked in the show notes to make that easier for you to find. So your list there, I'm glad you went through when you said mystic and then you listed everything else, because you have quite an impressive resume of things that you specialize in, which is very impressive because it is sort of all of the things that I don't do. So I am very fascinated to talk with you today.
Yay. I'd love to.
And first up, I would love to chat about your journey and just how you got started and came to where you are now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it starts a long time ago, back in the early 70s, actually, when I was a real little girl and I would have these dreams at night, very vivid. And I remember driving to a place with my mother, and we were going, I had to be like 4 or 5 years old. We're going for a photo shoot or something. I was adopted, so it was for the cradle. And I don't recall exactly what built up to that. But on the way there, I was telling her about a dream that I had had the night before and exactly what the home looked like that we were going to go to. So she's just listening, trying to find her way. This is way before GPSs existed. And so she's just trying to figure out, make sure we make it there. And we pull up, and that was it. It was the exact house that I had described, and neither of us had ever been there. And so in that moment, I remember pausing, just kind of like, yay, I found it. And she was very afraid of what just happened. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? Your little child just described everything. And so I interpreted that as maybe not a cool thing to do. So I tucked it away. And I've had plenty of other moments like that along the way, but life happens, and childhood was a little tricky. So I moved out fairly early. I moved out about 17, 18 years old, and I started working in the brokerage industry. A couple other jobs, but mainly in that for about 10 or 12 years. And during that time, I was going back to who I was. Like, I was able to do the numbers. I was able to hang with the people there. It wasn't easy. I didn't love it, but I was good at numbers and all that. But on the back end, I was reading Norman Vincent Peale, Gary Zukov, Andrew Weil, Shirley MacLaine talking about past lives. I'm like, oh my gosh, for a South Side Chicago Italian Catholic girl, I think these people are more my tribe than what I look like on the outside, and kind of how I was raised. So over time, that just kept growing, and it got to the point late 90s, early 2000s with the move to California that it was just I couldn't be the corporate person anymore, and I jumped straight into my healing work, and I never looked back.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, that is a huge career shift.
Yep.
Just did a 180 there. I love it.
Completely.
So you had those experiences as a child, but it never really turned off for you. That you just kind of were quiet about it, but it still was going on.
Absolutely. I could tell you countless times where I remember one time my brother wanted to buy a car, and he says, I really want to get this car. I'm like, all right. And, I was busy, things were happening. And all of a sudden that night I had a dream that he had gotten to an accident with it. And so I called him the very next morning, again, pre-cell phone era. And I says, don't buy this car. I had a dream about it, and I couldn't get a hold of him. Well, he finally gets a hold of me later that day and says, "Oh, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. I bought the car last night and I got in an accident in it this morning." I'm like, oh my gosh. And so
Wow.
these things would, and he was fine. Luckily, it was, nothing tragic. Obviously, he was there to chat about it and he was fine. But I had these things always, always. And it didn't turn off, but it was really tucked away, right? Like, who could reflect that back then? Right?
Do
Like,
you
nobody.
have any advice then for people to sort of tap back into that? Because I think that is something that happens more commonly than we think with children. And then
Oh,
we sort of all like tamp that down and are taught to just forget that. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for sort of bringing that back if people are interested in like tapping into that side of themselves.
absolutely. I'm a firm believer, and actually, Stephanie, I'm so happy you asked me this question because it is the foundation of the work that I do with my clients. Um, I don't believe I'm anything too amazingly special here with this gift. I mean, sure, I've practiced it a lot. Yep, it was there when I was younger. Sure, other lifetimes, other incarnations delivered me here. Absolutely. I mean, there is something in me that is very familiar with this. However, I believe I'm the canary in the coal mine. And the canary in the coal mine is just a sense of what everybody else is about to encounter, right? Or is capable of. I just kind of went there first. Um, or I'm there a little earlier, so to speak. So to me, this way of being is an invitation to live differently. I don't feel it's a learn how to do this in 3 easy steps. I mean, sure, there's ways, and I always share those as well. But it comes part and parcel with an invitation to really have trust, commitment, and a continual relationship with your inner self. To trust that inner self, that inner horizon, more than you trust that external horizon every time. And even when fears bubble up. And when you could do that continuously, right, build that trust, more and more insight will come your way. And I'm sure you can completely speak to this. It never steers you wrong.
No, absolutely true. And that honestly is something that I still struggle with, even though I do the podcast and I'm very educated on these things and I know that they exist. I like fully believe everything. It's just I still struggle. So I'm always interested of like, how can I even get better at this? But yeah, absolutely. It never steers me wrong when I actually pay attention, listen to my intuition, work on things. I'm always going down the right path. It's when I sort of, don't that I'm steered wrong.
Right. Well, and that you bring up actually another major point that I always am working with my clients and myself with is that the current paradigm that we are in really focuses on the end game, crossing the finish line. Gosh, when I become the reader that I imagine to be, when I become healed, when I get that certificate, when I get the money, when I get this, when I get that, graduate from here, then it will begin and I won't have these issues anymore. And what I love to say is the end game is that there is no end game. There's none. So when you grow, I have this all the time as well, but it doesn't show up often. And I've been doing this for like 55 years now. I mean, I'm 55. And so being with this, I come to understand that I'll be going really well for a long time. And all of a sudden, I'll get these waves of, oh my gosh, you're going to go do what? You're going to read? Who do you think you are? Are you kidding me? And it doesn't matter that I've just been doing this for like decades. It's just like I get to this point. But what I've come to understand is when you hit that point, it's because you're leveling up. That is the universe. The universe is continuously forever evolving, kind of like your cell phone. Just when you figure it out, they're like, "Woo, upgrade." You're like, "No, not the upgrade."
Such a great, but also
At least that's
terrible
how I
analogy.
feel.
It's so true.
That's how I feel. I'm like, oh my God, where do I press? Yeah, no.
Oh, that is so true. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That is like the perfect analogy for it, and like it pains me because I'm like, oh my gosh, that happens every time.
Every time you're like, I'm rocking it. Yeah, I got this down. And then they change it. You're like, no.
Oh my gosh, yes, I feel the same way with like pretty much like all technology and social media. I'm like, I just practiced this, and now you're gonna make a new one. Don't do this to me.
I think us witches are kind of more like that. Would you say?
Yes.
We can talk to dead people all day long. Look at the stars. Fabulous. But don't give us a cell phone.
Oh, completely agree. But then, I mean, that's absolutely right. There is no end game. And I
No.
always say that there's no mastering it, no matter how long you work with a particular medium in a particular field sort of witchcraft. Like you're still going to be learning for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the best part of it, right? That's the best part. And so just really working on your relationship in the moment. That's all it is. The end game isn't out there. It's right here. So what do you feel today? Are you listening to every aspect of your being? And I get into that more specific, but just as an overview, are you answering the call to every aspect of yourself in truth, even in hard truth, in every moment? And when you do, then there comes.
That leads me into a question that I have. Where do you sort of start when people come to you for readings or for mentorship because they're trying to get better down this path? Where do you sort of start with people? I mean, is there a questionnaire, or do you get a feel from them just from like an email that they send you?
No, it's funny too, because some of my clients, especially the ones, most of the people who do mentoring with me, which are chunks of time, right? They've already had like singular readings, and they'll ask me, should I do this? Should I do that? And I even have consultations, but I say to them, what do you feel? I can't tell you. And so they come to me with themselves. That's it. And the drive. And then I ask them when they step into the first class for mentoring specifically, what are your intentions? And I call them the big four. And the big four are what are your intentions for your spiritual body, not your soul, that's different, but your spiritual body, your mental body, your emotional body, and your physical body. What are your intentions for all of those aspects of you? And then we hop in and we connect via the intuition. I mean, I do all those other things, but I'm intuitive first. All those other things are just extras.
Yeah, I would imagine that you could, after doing this, get a good feel for people. I have an easier time reading other people,
Right.
reading myself.
Yes.
I always can feel like maybe because I have like a clearer eye view of other people, whereas like with my own life, I'm so invested in it that I can't like
Yes.
see the clear picture. So like it's so much easier doing readings for other people.
Oh my gosh, right? Oh no. And right. Oh yeah, I have somebody that I go to. I mean, I figure out a lot for myself, but when something really intense comes up and I know that it's a deep wound from other lifetimes, a dynamic I've been working on very heavily, I will lean on my bestie who I've known for almost 30 years. And, she'll be like, yeah. This is where it's at. This is where it's at. And I'm like, oh yeah, good. And because there's always a part of us that's healing. And so, this work guides us, but the emotion can get really thick, right?
Oh yeah. And speaking of healing, something that I absolutely want to talk about today, because I have no experience with this whatsoever, past lives. I'm so excited to chat with you about that. How did you even go down that path? How do you work with it now and getting people in touch with like their past lives? What is the process?
Such a great question. So I'll tell you, I don't know. Well, I do know a little bit, but I'm going to tell you, it's like a specialty of mine
Oh,
because
I love it.
when I see somebody, I can really just the messaging that comes through me immediately takes them to the root of their wound. And so we may have all the wounds that we have in this life for sure. But it's really, it stems elsewhere. It comes from, it's rooted elsewhere beyond this time and space. Almost always, even if it's a really challenging lifetime, that is most oftentimes just the pinnacle or the culmination. And the reason why we're kind of going back to it is because we get to step into that same wound, but with also other masteries from other lifetimes that we didn't have when it originated all those years ago. And so we're really here to meet it and to integrate those two bits. And so what I do is, I've always been fascinated with past lives. I was reading Shirley MacLaine books in the 90s, and she talks all about past lives. Not something I was raised with, but it was part of my, just my awareness. It was always a call to me. And I studied traditional Chinese medicine, and with yoga, those cultures are, you know, really, they're geared around past lives, right? Like, so that's a big part of their historic truth and practice culturally. And so when I would start to get readings, I would hear that these people would go into those chakras. And Berkeley Psychic Institute, which is where I would do some training years ago, a branch off of that, we would read the chakras. And so then as my work developed, just getting these past life downloads inherently within a session, it would just come. Like somebody would say, my boyfriend's doing this. And I'm like, okay. And I'd go to get the answer and I'd get some past life story. And so I would link those two together. And so now it's just a real huge basis of my work, is particularly in the mentoring. I have the Into the Mystic program that I do, and every single chakra, I go into the root trauma and I ask for it, and I'm given a name, I'm given a place, and I'm given a story. And then I teach my clients, you know, I close that lifetime off. I call it home. I stop it. I call it home, because we're all kind of fractured energy and we become more whole. And then they use that life now, today, whenever something comes in that is very similar to it dynamically in the dynamics. And so they're able to place the wound somewhere and say, nope, I already did that in a past life. It's over in this life. It's over. And so it's amazing how rich and healing that is, like over the top healing for people. It's just fascinating.
Oh, I love that as a topic. It's just something that I have no experience in, but I'm fascinated. I know there's cultures that believe that we do carry that like from our past lives, and you're never going to reach that final sort of state of like nirvana and rest and not being reincarnated until you heal all of those past lives and traumas. And I just find that concept so fascinating. I don't know what I believe about the afterlife or what happens to us. I'm still like floating out there and change my mind every single day. So this entire topic is just fascinating to me.
It's mind-blowing. Can I give you an example that might just kind of...
Yes. Of course.
Like in my beginning journeys, you know, so I was an IPO trader, right? Last seen, and I started at school at night, and I began by getting certified in massage in California, San Diego. Mueller College at the time is a certified school, and I went there, and then I became, I went on to traditional Chinese medicine studies that they have, but I was also teaching. I was asked to be a teacher. So here I am teaching, and as I would put my hands on somebody, it would just flash, like it would just come into my vision, right? Inside, you know how you get the vision. I'm very visual. I could smell, I could hear, I could see. And so it would flash. And there was one girl, she was a student there, and I was just working on her back. And I got up to her neck, and I got this visual of these people dragging her out of a home. It almost looked like a mud hut, but it was rounded a little bit, kind of built into the side of a little hill or something. And they pulled her out of the home, and she has this black, I could still see it plain as day. She's got a black, it almost felt like burlap or some kind of potato sack dress on, and nylons or tights that were very thick underneath the dress. And they take her, and they're screaming, and she's screaming, and she's got a little white collar, and they sadly, they hang her. They hang her. And I remember hearing the rope, the squeakiness of the rope, which, I've never witnessed this in my life, personally, this life, but I remember that in the smells and the sounds. And so I just, and then I remember looking up at her face, and her eyes had come out of her sockets, right? It was a little intense. I'm like, oh, and then I take my hands off her because I'm freaking out. I'm like, why do I have to see these things? And I'm like, take my hands off. And so she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, well, I'm thinking, do I say this to her? I mean, this is heavy, right? It's heavy. And so the delivery is everything, because you have to hold the space for someone if you're going to bring them this type of a wound. So we sat and we chatted about it, and she's like, yeah, please, please, please tell me I'm capable. I want to hear it. So I share it with her very gently. And she sat there frozen, and she left. And I'm like, oh, great. She couldn't, I shouldn't have said it, right? I was going through my mind. I shouldn't have said it. And then she comes back. And I remember, though, during the story, that what had happened is that in that lifetime, she had been somebody who worked with herbs and things like that, like what we would consider a healer, a healer of sorts. And it wasn't really allowed at that time. Like, they hung her for what she did, right? They were afraid of her. She was out doing something with the moon one night, and she was just picking herbs, but they thought it was craziness or whatever. And they killed her. So she comes back to me like a week later, and she catches me in the hall. She goes, Jeannine, I want to show this to you. I said, all right. And she whips out these pictures of her in the hospital. And she said, I had told my husband I wanted to go to massage school, and he got extremely violent with her. He had a violent past, and he choked her, almost killed her, till her eyes bulged out of her head.
Oh my God.
And she lived, of course, made it through, left the guy, and then found her way to the school that she was at, where we met, where she was my student. So she, we have these past life patternings to go over the threshold and beyond what the end result used to be. We don't do it to revisit and live there, although it feels that heavy when it's happening, because it's coming from a place where we left off and it wasn't a good ending. But, or whatever, it doesn't always have to be that exact type of a story, but she made it. And there she was. And she said, you don't know how good this makes me feel to know that I'm done with this now, that I didn't do anything wrong. I almost had to walk through this storm. I found myself on the other side, and I succeeded. I mastered my trauma. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, how do people prepare if they're going to go down this path of trying to heal and figure out their past lives? Like, does that come up often? Things that are that traumatic?
Yes.
How do people get ready for that? Just know that you're going to experience something like that.
Right. Well, it's all in the delivery. And I'm firm believer that people only heal as deeply as you've healed yourself. So this is our work, and I know you know this. It's not an intellectual journey. I mean, sure, there are some things we could learn and chat about and discover. This is about, how deeply have I gone with myself? Do I hold myself? Am I thoughtful with myself? Can I contain myself? Because only then can you really be thoughtful and contain what somebody else is about to go through. So I let them know that it's going to be tricky. I let them know it's going to be sticky. I also ask them if they want to hear it or not. But there is also, there's medicine in the hearing, and then they work with it, and I hold the space and I go in there with them. I'm like, we're in this together. You're safe, you're free, you're loved. This is an old vision that you're walking through, but you have the tools to move past it, or it wouldn't be coming. It wouldn't be showing up. And I liken it to, I'm from Chicago, and me, 16-year-old girl, learn how to drive on the Dan Ryan in the middle of a snowstorm, right? You spin out and you're like, okay, that's it. Never again am I driving in the snow. I'm going to move to all warm places. Or you could say, I'm going to stick around and learn how to drive in this storm. But let's fast forward 40 years. Driving on the same Dan Ryan, right? Haven't been there in a while. Snowstorm hits. Sure, snowstorms are treacherous. Yep. Dan Ryan is crazy town. But I'm different. I'm not 16 anymore, right? I'm 40 years older. And it's either I run away and continue to be afraid of where I'm at, or I accept that I'm ready to integrate this completely differently and to experience it completely differently. So I prepare them in that way and hold them in that way, and we walk through it together.
Have you ever found, like sort of called it off at the beginning that you had somebody that you decided really was not ready, was not mentally prepared for that?
Let's see, that's such a good question. I always make sure, like, for instance, some of my clients, I'll be channeling, I'll hear information, and then I pause and they're like, listen, I could handle the hard stuff. Just tell me. And I'm not only feeling what they could handle, but I'm also speaking to the being that went through the trauma, right? And so they may be able to handle it, or not, but most times they're like, just tell me, I don't care if it's harsh. I'm like, no. I have to speak to it as if I'm chatting with the being that went through it, right? And that's the energy medicine. I mean, homeopathy does the same thing in their way, and I meet their softest point in them, or that most traumatized part. But a majority of my people, the people that come to me, because I'm really big with intending, they come to me because our energies match. I go big or I go home when it comes to this work, and I go deep. However, I am completely calibrated to delivering it with as much gentleness as I can. I really, it's all about presentation. It's all about presentation.
I would imagine that if people are to the point where they're coming to you, that they're prepared for what might be coming next.
Right. And that's a frequency, right? I those are the people that I get now.
Most of my work found you for a reason.
Right. And if they're not ready, then I won't get it, because I've made a promise with my God, my source, what comes through me, that I only deliver to them what they are ready to hear. I don't have any kind of ego in this at all.
It's so fascinating. You must have like so many more stories. That was just such a career. I can't even imagine. I personally don't know if I would be ready for that. But I mean, I admit that about myself, that maybe I'm not. Like, I joke about being a French aristocrat in a past life because I have a birthmark on the back of my neck. So I was like, I got beheaded in a past life. But I don't know. I don't want to know if it's true.
Whoa. Right.
I'm not ready to know if it's true, but it might be.
No, I hear you. Those that are ready will come, and it is so healing. It's crazy cool healing. Like, they get so empty and so silent on the inside. That's a whole other level of the healing, is they get to be with this empty in a different way. They're like, what do I do with this? I'm like, I know, right?
Yeah, and then it's an amazing feeling.
It's cool. Yeah. It's really cool.
Well, one last thing that I wanted to touch on is to just chat about your book that you have written. And I am not sure on the timing of the publication of this episode, but it's either out or coming soon, right?
It is coming, and I too am unaware of the end date on that. You try to get it into editing and all this stuff. You're like, what? It takes what?
Yeah, when it's out of your hands, you're like,
It's really, I'm just kind of riding the rafters on that one. But the book is called Dark Matters, and it speaks to again, this fundamental belief of mine that, wherever we go, there we are. And I speak to that, on the heels of some of the spiritual speak where we believe we need to focus only to the light. And while, yes, that is law of attraction, we draw to us that which we want, absolutely. But in law of attraction, we draw to us that which we are as well. And there's only so much lightness that we could go towards before the darkness catches up. And so, the light side of the moon, dark side of the moon, they're still both the moon. And it's really about saying, why don't we just go to the stuff we're afraid of first, which is what I do. I go into that space. And we're like, let's meet it before it meets us, because it will. That's why we're here. We see it in astrology. We see it in our patternings and relationships. And so the dark matters shows people how they could really be with themselves on a daily basis and really shift the paradigm towards, I know this is going to sound crazy, but getting excited when we get triggered. Getting excited when we feel sensitive or charged about something, because those things are pointing us to the very space within us that is longing to be witnessed and healed. Only then will we be free.
Sounds like a great book. I'm very excited for it to come out.
Well, thank you.
I need to get my hands on it. So tell your editors.
I'll tell them. We'll gang up on it.
I'm ready now. No, there is no lightness without the dark. The two go hand in hand. So it's absolutely going to come meet you, no matter how much you try to run away from it.
No, can't. Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very, very excited to get my hands on that then. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye out, and I will have that linked in the show notes, guys, if you want to, keep your eyes out too on the websites.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you.
But before we wrap up, I would love to ask you if you have any advice that you would like to offer somebody who is just starting out or maybe looking to grow a little bit in their practice, whether that is astrology, past lives, meditation, yoga, anything in general. Is there any last bits of advice you'd like to offer people?
Yes. Trust yourself. Get empty. Answer the call of the things that have been untethered, unmet inside of you. Commit to being with them every day. Doesn't mean you're going to finish them, but if you commit to be with them every day, then you will have a greater space of empty for all the messaging that you want to hear. And then trust yourself. Even if people cannot reflect it back to you, that's all right. They really are the old vibe of who you've been, and where you're going is somewhere different. So strap on your courage pack, man. You've got this. If you have this call, if you have this gift, trust it, go for it. And there are so many ways to chat about it now. For years, that's not how it was. And I really had to keep this private. But that's not how it is now. So lean into people who can reflect it back to you. And did I say trust yourself? Yep. Trust yourself.
No, that's great advice. And you're right. It takes a courage pack. I like that. Because it's easier said than done.
It is. It's not an easy road, but it's the truest road.
And absolutely worth it in the end. Always. Like we said at the beginning, when I do trust myself and listen to my intuition and pay attention, then I'm like on the right path. And it, things go south when I start ignoring that.
Yeah, exactly. The detours, they do. So just rip that Band-Aid off, man, and jump in. And if you build it, they will come every time.
Absolutely. Great advice. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's so much fun chatting with you. And I am going to give more thought to past lives and research it more and decide, maybe I'll be ready at some point. Such a great topic. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you so very much. I had a blast. Thank you.
And listeners, again, I'll have everything linked for you so you can go check out more information. And that's everything that I have for this week. I will see you in the next one.
Need even more? Subscribe to Patreon and YouTube for exclusive bonus content.
Order a themed witchcraft box every month through Witch Wednesdays on Etsy. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. Find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.